Before we get to today's video, if any of you have made any of the quilts from my scrap fabric challenge, I would love to see what you've done. Please post them on social media at TOQ Scrap Fabric Challenge. Can't wait to see what you've made. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maureen O'Connor from Quilters Heaven in Northbrook, Illinois, and I am the Opinionated Quilter. Today's episode, number 45, I'm going to share with you a really great scrap stash quilt that uses 2.5-inch strips. And if you're like me, you have a gazillion of them. So I'm going to show you how we can use them. But before we get to that, I'm not going to do an opinion today. I'm going to give you two really great tips of things I had to use very, very recently in my sewing. If you recall, last time I did a piece where I showed you how to put things right sides together and then turn right side out and quilt later. Well, I made up that little sample using this fabric, and I said, I can't waste that good fabric. So after turning it right side out, I slid in some Insul Bright where the opening still was, and then I quilted it, and now I have a very nice usable hot pad that after we film this video, I'm taking home and I am going to use it. What I found, and I've seen this before when I've done the loops for the buttons on the tote bags. It's the same thing here where you have these skinny little loops, and they're skinnier than the width of the feed dogs. So I'm going to take you over to the sewing machine just to show you that real quick. To make the loop for the hot pad, I cut a strip of fabric 1 inch wide and much longer than you see here. And then to make it, I fold in half, press, fold up to the pressed line, and then fold over again, and you get this tiny, tiny little piece. And if you lay that piece into your machine to sew the opening closed, you can see here that it fits dead center between the feed dogs. So if I tried to sew this now, it would not advance because the feed dogs are not touching the fabric. So what's the solution? Well, the reason you cut way longer than you were going to need is you have to attach it to something that will touch the feed dogs. So I just grabbed a scrap of fabric and put it under the presser foot. And then I sewed and just kept sewing till I got my whole piece sewn. And then I cut off what I needed. And then this is waste. This will go into the dog bed stuffing bag. That was tip number 1. The second thing that happened to me recently is I was making the radio way and I found one of my white on white fabrics was upside down. So I wanted to flip it right side up and I ripped it. Well, at that time, I punched a hole right at the 1/4 inch mark in the seam line. Well, I couldn't find another piece of the same fabric, and while it's true, I could have substituted any other of the white on white fabrics that I had, I decided that I was going to salvage the piece that I had. Now, I did punch a hole in this fabric, but you can hardly see it. It's right here. And the way to get this inside the seam allowance, what I did was I put the fabric on the side without the hole in it, and I pushed it in a bit. It's not lined up even with this purple here. And I sewed this at 1/4 inch from the purple. So you can see it's a very tiny, tiny seam allowance here. But I did put my stitch length down to 1.7. You want to have a really little stitch length because you don't want this to come undone. And then after you sew it, you go ahead and you press it. And then we're going to trim it, and I will show you we'll go back to the cutting mat so you can see. So now I've sewn it to the next piece here, and as you can see, I'm sticking the seam ripper into the hole. You can see that the hole is now to the inside of the seam allowance. So the piece is salvaged, the ripped piece is salvaged. Now it's not something you want to do with great regularity, but when you end up in trouble with not another piece to use, it's a solution you can use. So I hope you enjoyed these tips. Let's go ahead and move on to the episode. The name of the quilt is Lemon Blush. It's by me and my sister Designs. My distributor does not have it anymore, but I would believe that you could get it from me and my sister Designs. It's a jelly roll friendly quilt. In other words, a 2.5-inch strip quilt. And we've talked before about how many 2.5-inch strips we have. We have more than we know what to do with. We try to sort them by color groupings. We have just so many that you can take these and turn them into a beautiful quilt. Now, how do we do that? In this pattern, it calls for you cutting these pieces 6 inches. Now you can cut them whatever you want. You can make these shorter, you can make these longer. If you make these longer, your braid panel will be wider. You can also, if you decide you want to use 2-inch strips, you can use 2-inch strips. You can use whatever scraps and stash you have, which is the beauty of this kind of a quilt. Now, that you do have to start with a quarter square triangle. Why a quarter square triangle instead of half square triangle? Because on a quarter square triangle, this is the straight of grain. So you'll cut a quarter square triangle to have the one side be the length you want to cut your pieces. And you sew this one on first, press, this one on, press, and go on and on and on. Now I wouldn't do one braid at a time. I would be doing 5 at a time, and chain the 5, press, chain 5 more, press, rather than one at a time. So as you can see, the next one would go here, and you would sew this one. Now the thing on this quilt is then you do need to trim these up. And so there is a little bit of waste. But if you look at how much waste this is and the amount of 2.5-inch strips I have, I don't really care that there's waste on these. It's just very easy to cut your strips whatever length you want. Like I said, 5, 5.5, 6, 6.5, whatever it is. Just boom, boom, boom. And you've got them all ready to sew onto your braid. Now in my version, I used not a jelly roll, more of a stash. I pulled all fabrics that I liked together, and I do like the florals, and I buy too many of the florals, but you can't do all that in the quilt. So you need the looks like solids, the pink, the yellow, the green. Even the stripe is a lot of fun. And then, of course, I love purples and blues, so I put those in there. And the success to these quilts, and I've said this before, is fabrics that go together, that look good together. Rather than throwing everything but the kitchen sink in, it's really nice to end up with something that everything looks nice together. And of course, everybody thinks something looks nice is different. We're all different. So it has to look good to you. But as you pull your fabrics for a quilt like this, think about what you like that goes together. So the quilt ends up being, now I didn't put an outside border on here yet. I'm only at 59 width now. And the pattern says it's 61 by 72. I'm not at 61 yet, but if I added the border on, I'd be very close. I did add a few more braid pieces to mine, so mine is a little longer. Mine's already at 72, so if I added a border, mine would be longer. But that's the thing with quilting. Make what you like. Make the size you like. Now, another option in the braid quilt, this was 45 degrees here at each turn. I showed you this before when we talked about the scrap quilts where you could do one piece over and over again. And this is a 60 degree. And the thing that's nice about this one is that you don't have to do the trimming. It's all, because they're pre-cut and all the right size, they all come out even. And I did show you this when I showed it in the scrap quilt, but I didn't actually show you the best way. You can use any 60-degree triangle you have, doesn't matter the brand. You can use the tip of a 60-degree diamond if you like. And what I did is I put tape here, and I had a ruler marker piece that I put here, but I measured how big I wanted the piece to be. So if I lay my ruler on the piece, that's where I laid my marker where the bottom is going to be. And then I did the same exact thing with the blue here. And then you can take your 2.5-inch strips, sit in front of the TV. I lined my marker on the bottom, and I go ahead and cut, and then I flip it over, line it up again on the bottom, and you just keep cutting across till you have all your pieces made. That's obviously dog bed. So once you have all your pieces made, you can start sewing them together. And we talked about math on triangles and diamonds before. And so this is 60 degrees. So what's this angle going to be? Does everybody remember? If you've got 60-degree triangle, the obtuse angle is 120. So you want to cut a piece that's going to have a 120-degree angle here to sew these onto. And it's simple enough. It sounds like it's hard. It's not. And you just can do the same thing that we did over here and make columns as long as you want them. And then you can put borders on here or just put one piece in between like we did with the first of the Scrap Challenge quilt. In the pattern that I did, it has the two small strips and then a wider one in the middle. But do whatever you like. That's the fun of sewing. And whatever's in your stash. If you can use stash, use stash. Then you don't have to buy anything extra. So that's my scrap quilt today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, happy sewing.